Folks, some things just should never be forgotten. So we're going to talk about some important anniversaries coming up this year on the Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Thanks for watching the Hot Zone and thanks for supporting us, making us break the top 50 out of over 700 podcasts in the news and politics genre where we reside. So that's really fantastic. Please share it with your friends, like it on Facebook, and also go and subscribe at patreon.com/hotzone if you get a chance. We'd really appreciate that. So this year is really important because it's the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. 1945 saw a lot of milestones when it comes to World War II that we really should remember. One of them happened this coming week, and that's the liberation of Auschwitz. Now, if you don't remember, Auschwitz was actually a whole bunch of camps, about 40 different camps that existed in Poland from 1940 to 1945. And in that time, it became the place where I would say arguably more human beings were murdered in that spot than in any other place on the planet in history. I'm talking about 1.1 million people who were killed at Auschwitz, whether it was by the gas chambers, by beatings, by starvation, by exposure, or by medical experiments. All of those things happened at Auschwitz during the Nazi reign. And this is the 75th anniversary of that. Auschwitz today is a memorial not so much to the horrors that took place there as it is to the strength of the human spirit, I think. Leon Weintraub is a 94-year-old Holocaust survivor who has a message for today's youth about why it's important for them to remember. Check this out.
It tells here that I have been taken from Groß Rosen to Flossenbürg on February 25th, 1945, and transported to concentration camp Natzweiler, Commander Offenburg, on March 22nd, 1945. This is my working card, my ID card from the ghetto Liesmannstadt, my photo taken 1943, I was 17 here, telling that I am working the metal resort, the metal factory. As long as they are deniers that such things happens, it is so important to keep this memory. Today are young Poles marching on the streets and the towns of the country of my birth, with uniforms very close and similar to the Nazi uniforms, with slogans identically as the Nazi slogans, and identify themselves as Nazis. This unbelievable that descendants of Poles killed by the Nazis call themselves today Nazis. And on this picture, my mother sent it to her sister to United States, USA, who emigrated from Poland to USA 1910. I think that the right-wing government tolerates this terrible people, this Nazi and anti-Semitic people, because they don't want to lose their voice for the election. I am a born optimist. I am not a believer. I have only hopes. I hope that the common sense will become most important and the fanatics, the extreme thoughts and ideas will be defeated by the common sense, by liberalism, live and let live. I think there are not enough done to keep this terrible, what happens during this war, in mind, because to remember is to not let it be forgotten and to keep it alive, because such things should never happen again.
Maurice Gluck survived the Holocaust as a child and remembers losing his parents and then finding them back again. And his story is incredibly powerful. Check this out.
My parents were both deported. They were arrested at their home a short while after I was hidden, and they were sent to Auschwitz. My mother died there over a year later. Father got off the train. They needed some workers, so he was sent to a work camp, and from there to another work camp, and to another work camp, and another one, basically concentration camps. In that bath lay a man, barely recognizable. Was more like a skeleton covered with flesh, all gray, unshaven, and bald-headed. And when Van den Stock saw me, he said, "Look, Maurice, this is your father." And father wanted to hug me and stretch out these thin arms, and it so frightened me, I just ran away and cried. Father put me to bed, and the next morning when I woke up, there was my father and a woman soldier next to my bed. And father said, "Look, Maurice, this is your mother, Helen. She just now came back from the war." And I was very happy, because at that moment, all of a sudden, I had both a father and a mother of my own. Mother sat next to me on the sofa, and she told me, "Well, since now you are bar mitzvah and you're already grown up, I have to tell you the truth. And the truth is that I'm not really your mother. I'm your mother's sister. She died during the war. And Father and I wanted you to have a real family, and that's how it was." And again, it was a shock. So I ran away to the sofa, which was where I slept, and I cried all night. I had nightmares. But in the morning I got up. Mother was up already, and in the kitchen, so I went up to her. I hugged her. And I told her she was my only mother. And that's how it was. She was my mother until the very last day. I think that it's really a shame that 75 years after the war, after the liberation of the concentration camps, that anti-Semitism is again raising its head in many parts of the world. I very much hope that learning more about the Holocaust, and in the hope that this gathering of leaders from all over the world will find ways to fight anti-Semitism and let it be known, let the story of what happened then be known and learn from that it should never, ever happen again.
I call this a concentration camp for kids because that's exactly what it's turning out to.
The Hollywood director and the producer, Judd Apatow, he tweeted this out. He's talking about the president. He says he's a Nazi. He wants no judicial process. He kidnapped children and commits acts of violence for political gain and to support his racist views.
We can't find a solution to this problem without harming children, without putting them into concentration camps.
Dachau, factory of horrors. It is known that from 1941 to 1944, up to 30,000 people were entombed here at one time, and 30,000 were present when the Allies reached Dachau. They came from Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, France, and Holland. Incoming prison trains arrived, carrying more dead than living. Those strong enough to travel were brought to Dachau from outlying points which were threatened by the Allied advance. This is how they looked when they arrived. Some survived, and when the rescuers arrived, they administered what aid they could. Others died after the liberation. They were buried by their fellow prisoners. This is what the liberators found inside the buildings. These are the survivors.
So I just spent a couple hours inside Dachau. This is this memorial site for the first concentration camp opened by the Nazis. And, you know, it's an incredibly powerful and visceral experience for sure. But it got me thinking that, you know, we should really stop in the United States trying to compare so much of what happens politically, what we see in the news. We see so many people comparing what's happening in the U.S. today to the Nazis and what happened back then. And I think that to do so, especially after visiting this, is every bit as ignorant as it is disrespectful to the 41,500 people who were murdered inside those walls. We need to just stop. We need to stop comparing everything to the Nazis, because nothing that is happening in the United States right now compares to this. We have to remember and to teach our kids that it was the U.S. 7th Army that liberated this camp, because that's what Americans do. Americans bring liberty. And we also need to teach them what they teach their children in Israel about the Holocaust, and that is never again.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.